All right. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for a digital marketer survival guide to medical affairs omnichannel. Really excited to have you with us today. This is a bit of a different webinar than we're used to because many of you are actually joining us for the first time because typically every month we fill this room with folks exclusively from medical affairs. But today's is a little bit different where we're going to be focusing on the partnership between the digital marketing team and medical affairs when often they're invited in to collaborate on omnichannel strategies. What we're going to do, maybe just as introduction, is I'm going to share with you a really quick story about how I met Justin. So Justin and I met because I was working with the head of medical affairs at a small pharmaceutical company when the head of medical wanted to engage in a deep and meaningful digital and omni-channel program, really expand the audience that they were trying to engage with, go deeper with the KOLs that they've already been seeing. And so the head of medical affairs went to the digital marketing team of this organization and said, "Hey, who would like to help medical?" And as the story goes, Justin raised his hand and said, "I would be happy to," and got pulled right into medical affairs. And then upon arrival, found that there were things that were maybe just a little bit different than he was used to on the commercial side. And so I will let Justin introduce himself in just a minute. But since then, I've had the pleasure of working with Justin across multiple clients. He's always been there. We've been bringing him in to help implement digital and omnichannel or opti-channel, whatever you want to call it, engagement strategies. And I've just always loved what a practical, hands-on approach he had. And so we're here to share some of that today from the perspective of what you need to know as a digital marketing person when you're working with medical affairs. So Justin joined us full-time at Acceleration Point in January to help implement practical, hands-on digital engagement and omnichannel solutions for medical affairs. So Justin, do you want to just give a quick hello and give them a little bit about your background, and then we will jump into the content.
Thanks so much, Scott, and good morning, everyone. To just give you a little backstory, I actually got started on the agency side. I then actually moved into the commercial side and then over to medical affairs and now at Acceleration Point. And my entire career had been in digital marketing in some capacity, whether that be, again, on the agency side or on the commercial side. And like Scott said earlier, I had a medical affairs VP that asked who would like to potentially help medical affairs. And I said, hey, I could do that. And I also said, how different can it really be? And that's when things really hit me. And some of these challenges that you're going to see today really did slap me in the face, learned kind of the hard way. And so hopefully today we're able to tell you about these situations and to hopefully provide some solutions also for you. So let's dive in and see some of these issues that we saw.
Yeah, so what we're going to do is we're going to share with you some of the challenges that Justin experienced when he was first getting started. And then after we kind of go through what the challenges are, we're going to share with you some of the things that Justin's put in place, both in his full-time role within the organization and then since then working with us.
So the very first one, and anyone on the digital side, you will probably agree with this, but that is that there's a lack of target and outcome measures. So sometimes there's the actual question of what outcomes are we measuring? And we, of course, on the digital side are always saying, what's the goal? And so in this case, there was a lack of this target and outcome measures that had to be in place. And so this was one of our challenges. We also had another big one that I'm sure a lot of you face, and that's compliance saying no. Digital medical campaigns, we can't do that. This is too digital. We can't implement this. That was another one. We also had lost in translation. A lot of the digital teams currently work within the commercial side of the house. And when they do jump the fence or start to talk with the medical side of the house, there are different terms. So there is this lost in translation that we also have. And then last, and this is also one that we've heard many times, even a few weeks ago at MAPS, we heard this a few times, but that is the field team could feel threatened by digital, like digital is coming for their job. And so those four are four pieces that I specifically saw and challenges that we saw within the organization at the time.
Yeah, so these are challenges that we've continued to hear, right? Outcome measures, maybe it's we're trying to work with our compliance partners so they understand how we might apply some of those capabilities. Ensuring that the medical team and the commercial team that's supporting them with digital initiatives and have the same language and the same topics that they are able to discuss. And then finally, what is the role of digital versus the field teams and what is that overlap, right? How do they support each other? What I'd love for you to do, it might be one of these four. It might be something completely different, but could you just put into the chat, just write into the chat, what is like your biggest challenge, right? The biggest challenge you are trying to overcome to deploy a digital or omni-channel program within your organization. Change management. Absolutely.
Yeah, that is definitely a big one for sure.
Yeah. Everybody just put it right in the chat for us here so we know where to go and field buy-in. Yes. And touch that relationship with what is the field versus digital doing? How does that relate? How is it different than commercial? Yes, having to explain it. Connected ecosystems. Yes. And Richard, I'm assuming that goes even beyond the technology, but assume a lot of that has to do with the connections. Outcome measures, definitely, Jason. Compliance. So all of the problems that Justin ran into, you're fighting here. Opportunities for outcomes, surprising resistance to measurement. Yeah. Yeah, it is often surprising. Excellent. Great. So, well, first of all, as you can see, just even from this chat, but also from Justin's story, you're not alone, right? This is just a natural part of where we are in the evolution of implementing digital and omnichannel and medical affairs. Because, what I've seen is that we've been talking about digital and omnichannel for probably about 8, 9 years for real. But if you look at the number of dedicated digital and omnichannel roles that medical affairs is implementing, just look on LinkedIn. It's accelerating very quickly this year. As we work across currently about 35 different organizations, there's dedicated budgets to digital and omnichannel programs. And so we're seeing that this year is different because people are now putting a lot of what they were researching and hypothesizing about into practice. So why don't we take a little bit of time to just share some of the things that Justin has found that he's had to do in order to overcome these challenges. And then if there is something more specific as we go through these that you'd like us to dig into around one of these specific challenges, please just drop a question in the chat, and we're happy to go deep on whatever topic is most important to you.
So, as you just saw, there are many different challenges here. And I think the big thing, I got into medical affairs and I said, I have the skills and I'm ready to go. I just had to actually realize that I had to apply them differently. And so I did bring all of this education and that was done on the commercial side, audience segmentation, content architecture, channel strategy, performance measurement, journey design. And so I brought all those into medical. But here are three things that I actually had to do within really week one. And one of those, meet with compliance, build channel readiness, starting with one channel, and also starting small and really making sure that the medical team understood those expectations and we were aligned.
Yeah, and that's really going to speak, I think it was Richard, to that concept of change management. So we'll get to that. Let's dig into these.
So the first thing I had to do, I met right away with compliance. And this was a big one for me because of course I came um, from the commercial side and I was used to a very commercial logic. You know, it was to persuade and convert, to move a script, to change a behavior. And all of a sudden I was being told there was this new medical logic that was thrown at me, educate and exchange, support scientific understanding. And of course, the MLR and compliance teams might look similar, but they are actually thought, you know, the content is thought about differently. And so I will take it. The big takeaway for me was the gap that most digital teams don't know what they don't know until it costs them weeks, until they actually get in to an MLR review, until they get into a compliance situation. And all of a sudden it's, of course, what can we use and what can't we use? So there's definitely education if you're coming from the commercial side or the digital side that you will also have to be looking at for your medical partners to for a little guidance potentially as well.
Yeah. So as we've been in, I mean, Justin and I have been in hours and hours and hours of compliance meetings, deploying first time campaigns for teams, right? By the way, the third or fourth one goes a lot easier than the first one. But when I think back to these first time conversations, and if I had to boil all of the things that compliance has concerns about down to one core area for you to focus on, it is narrowing in on this concept of proactive versus reactive conversations, right? By their nature, many or maybe even most digital channels are proactive by nature. Right now, we'll talk a little bit in a moment about reactive, but like most of the way that initial utilization of digital channels is done is to push or broadcast scientific content, scientific messages out. And if you don't have topics and content that is approved for proactive distribution, it's really hard to use a channel that most people can't picture another way to use, right? And the way that they're most of the time used is for proactive conversation. So for example, right, if I look at all of these different types of materials, right? So MSL materials can be reactive or proactive. Social is primarily a proactive, right? I'm putting content out. Congress could go both ways. Mass emails is usually one way. It's a push of scientific information. Personal emails are, banner ads in societies or in private social networks are. But these are all proactive ways of engagement. How many of you are like already doing some of these channels in a proactive way? Just put A if you have no proactive content, put B, put C, put D. Which ones are you using? Just you can answer more than once. Just put them in the chat so we know what channels you are using today. Using B, so MSL materials, definitely. I mean, that's where most people will start, right? Does anybody else have proactive approved content, or are you struggling with even getting proactive approved content? Okay, you've got proactive emails that you're doing. Excellent. Mass email, MSL materials, Congress. Okay. Yeah, so this is great, right? This is like where people start, right? The fact that nobody has said we don't have proactive content is a great place to start because we've actually had some organizations that had no proactively approved content when we started. The easiest place to start is with MSL materials and congresses because you've got a human in the loop. You've heard that in all of your AI talks, right? Where we're saying I'm using judgment, trained judgment on when and how to use it. But as we move into things like social, mass emails, even personal emails, and even banner ads, which we don't always call it that, but anytime that we're posting information in a society's website, in a newsletter, private networks, we need to have that piece be proactively approved. Okay, so for those of you that are on the digital marketing side, before committing to a channel that is by its nature proactive, make sure that you have proactive content that you're allowed to use in it. Okay. But this would be the very first thing to do. And I'll show you how that conversation went in a moment. Now, that is a great starting point. But then the second question is around, what do you mean by reactive? And so, just about 3, 4 weeks ago, we were in another conversation with the team where we actually had to back the conversation about reactive all the way up just to make sure everybody was on the same page. So, there's 2 parts to being reactive. There's the request and the response. And we actually have to work with teams to define, like, what do we mean? What do you allow? And how is that changing because of the digital environment? So, the request, right? Most people, most organizations start with a definition of, if you ask an MSL or you call in to MedInfo or you're at a booth and somebody asks a question, I can respond to you in the moment reactively, right? Like that's the normal starting point definition of what we mean by reactive. Now, some teams have already progressed to what we would call a standing information request. In fact, so many teams have created this methodology of defining and documenting a request from an HCP that says, if you have more information on this narrowly defined, very specific topic, please bring it to me. And that allows you to bring them new information as it comes out, right? So many teams have done that it's now a out of the box module in all of your favorite CRMs. And so if you're not doing that, that's like the next natural progression. And that allows me to bring a response to you over time. Often they'll have an expiration date, usually a year. And so that's like the next evolution of what we could define reactive by. Now, the third level of a request that is where a lot of the focus for a medical affairs leader in digital needs to be is, what does it look like when you have a digital request? So one of the open areas of debate and discussion, and we're seeing more and more of the teams we work with starting to approve this, is that if I'm in a digital tool, right, a portal, a chatbot, some people are even going as far as social, and I ask a question, does that allow me to now answer that question reactively? And that is the next part of the conversation to have around the request. So that way, if I come into your portal and I search for something, is that me asking you a question if I can present reactive responses to you? Okay, so that's the first. The second half of that compliance conversation that we're seeing is, how can I respond? Right? So again, the starting point where most are is that if you ask me the question live, I can respond to it live, right? You ask me the question, I can answer it. The second kind of evolution that we're starting to see, and it's becoming more common, is if you ask me the question live, can I provide you a personalized digital response to that? Right? So can I send you a document? Can I use an approved email or something that gives that answer to you after the fact? It doesn't have to be in person. And that's becoming pretty much commonplace as far as we see it. But the third is automated digital. So here is a scenario that we're seeing at least 2 of our colleagues start to put into practice right now, which I think is kind of the extreme, is that because I have a standing information request, when you log into the portal, I can show you something different than I could show somebody else who logs in. I'm also starting to see people say, well, we could have 2 different versions of a email that goes out on a topic, because some of our HCPs have asked us a question, and so we can have something go out different for them than those that haven't. Right. And so as you start to automate, right, maybe the furthest extreme of that is if you were able to do, which you can, NPI level targeting. All of the commercial folks online know what I'm talking about. Can I push something to you to drive awareness about some digital content that we have because you asked us a question, even though that content is only approved reactively? Right. So that is like the natural evolution of this conversation that we're seeing and end up in the middle of discussing. Real quick, just and then just I'll love you to jump in, but if anybody would like, just tell us where are you in that, right? So I don't know, or it varies greatly. You can do immediate personal responses. Are you at a C where you can do short-term responses? Do you have standing information requests, or are you all the way down the automated process right now? It varies. It varies. The immediate personal response varies. Yeah. Yep. Standing information requests. Good. Yeah, so it is a very sequential conversation, right? And one of the things that Justin and I were laughing at is it's really, really hard to skip these levels, right? If you can't provide an immediate personal response, or you can't do a personalized response short term, you can't do that. Like you'll just never skip those to get all the way to the end. So it's about moving that conversation and developing organizational comfort one step at a time. Justin, do you have anything to add on that?
I think the big thing here is this is also an area that someone coming from commercial, this is one of those lost in translation pieces. Like when you first get into medical affairs, everyone's already talking proactive, reactive, what you can use, how you can use it. This is actually when that you really should find your medical affairs buddy, your guide within medical affairs that can kind of help you move things along the way. There's also some great webinars that we also at Acceleration Point have as well that you can listen to, specifically on Omnichannel for medical as well, like today, but we have a few others out there and some podcasts as well to definitely learn about proactive versus reactive content and such. So this is definitely, I know that anyone that's commercial or on the digital side right now, you might be scratching your head saying, I don't understand this. But we can also help guide you through some of this as well, for sure. So the second thing that I had was channel readiness. And that was the second challenge. The second thing that had to happen is channel readiness. And so one of the big things here, everyone of course is eager, especially your VP of medical affairs might come in and say, we have these big aspirations. We want to do 15 channels. I want full omni-channel orchestration, digital everything. And some of this has already been done, of course, by commercial teams. But remember where commercials started. One campaign, one or two channels, and then you learn, you optimize, and you scaled. So start there. I want you to really think about this. Say, what is one channel that I can start working in and work on it compliantly, prove it, and then add to it. Again, remember also that you can't go from 0 to omni-channel, but you can go from 0 to 1. And of course, that is everything. And that is what's really going to also show that the digital can work on the medical side. For many of your organizations, you've already started looking at these things. But realistically, again, it's starting with one and really also having that setting that expectation with your medical affairs leadership as well, saying, coming in and saying, I know you want 15. Let's start baby steps here. We're crawling at this point. Crawl, walk, run. And I know that someday your organization will get to running as well on the topic.
And by the way, if anybody hasn't seen our On Point episode with Joyce Lowe, Joyce is on with us today. She has practically implemented this, right, one step at a time, and has done a great job as a digital leader in medical affairs. So, as part of that loss in translation is really about establishing kind of what is the goal of a particular campaign. And so some of the language about picking that next or first channel is about establishing a language that you can both use around the goal of that campaign. And so I'd like this is our language. You might have something similar that you use, but I want you to think about this in terms of science, scientific knowledge, posters that are shared at a Congress, publications that are out, right? You follow the same 4 steps for science as you would bringing awareness around other things. The first step is, and the goal might be to drive awareness, right? Like you shared something at a Congress, not everybody attended. is the goal of whatever campaign you're thinking about to increase awareness of the scientific material that was created, right? See, that is a very specific thing that medical affairs does today. They use sometimes MSLs to do that, right? All the Congress books that you create afterwards, right? It's about creating more awareness of the science, right? But digital is really, really good at this step of increasing awareness. So that could be a term that you use. The second level is once you become aware of a piece of science, is having ways of deepening your understanding around it. And so that would be things like more long form, video, portals, and of course, your field teams who are really good at teaching and educating. Medical education programs is a great one, right? Just like those two is a great place to start. The third step is, well, now that we have an understanding of that science, does anybody believe it? Right? Do they believe that it should impact how they care for patients? And so perhaps the purpose is to assess belief, right? Because you might do a digital campaign that has a lot of inbound, like using like a sermo or something like that, where you're gathering thoughts and feedback against a topic. Or is it about practical application, right? So is there a barrier between taking that science and putting it into practice? Right. And so if you can just use a framework like this where, hey, are we talking about driving awareness or understanding of the science? I can do a better job of guiding you on what channels to use. And when you first start, just pick one audience to do that with. Right. So, for example, most of you started with a channel called an MSL and MedInfo, right? You've got a channel in place. So one example of how to apply this early on, if you're first starting, is to just pick a different audience, right? A digital only audience, a group of people that you want to increase awareness and move them towards being able to understand the science that MSLs may never engage with. Right? That's a really safe space to start. Go ahead, Justin.
And Scott, one other thing to point out here is this is also when you do have potentially the situation of the field team potentially or your MSLs are actually feeling like digital is coming for me. Don't even focus on the MSL at this point. Focus on this whole other audience, a digital only audience that you could also be looking at. So again, when we looked at those four challenges that I saw, this is definitely also fits into that fourth one, talking directly, with the MSL teams and maybe a fear of digital coming into medical affairs.
Absolutely. A second really good place to start, if you've already got digital only segments, is a digital first segment. So this is where, I was working with a team um, that found that one of their best tactics in field medical to drive understanding were medical education programs. And I asked them, I said, listen, you're each MSL is already doing 3 a year. If they work so well, what would prevent you from not going from 3 to 4 per person a year, but what would prevent you from having 400 HCPs in those programs? Like, just, I don't know if you have that demand, but what's preventing it? And what they shared was it's not the program itself. It was the effort of making people aware of that program and getting people to commit to attend. What a beautiful place to partner with digital, right? So digital could be an awareness tool of the programs that our field medical teams might be providing. Okay, so then you could actually have an overlap where we say we're going to have a group of people that we think would benefit from these medical education programs, but you don't have the capacity or the relationships to go personally invite. And we're going to make them aware of these programs and drive registration of that. Okay. And then the last place you could choose to start is MSL first. So a lot of MSL teams are finding that they have less and less time face to face with that HCP. And so instead of potentially following up afterwards with one email, maybe you have 2 or 3 planned. Maybe those point you to a portal that has the content you want to share with them versus attaching it so that they get brought into your environment so that they have the opportunity to expand and find other content on their own. Okay, so this would be a place to start, right? If you're just starting or if you're having trouble with some change management conversations, especially when it comes to the relationship with field, we suggest start with a digital only audience who is the MSL not engaging with. Then, how can you drive awareness to a digital first audience that brings people to an MSL? And then finally, if an MSL does have an engagement with somebody, how do you deepen their opportunity to learn and be educated on the content by moving them into a digital environment?
And Scott, this also shows people that digital and the field team can live in harmony as well. Digital can actually help the MSL. Again, on that bottom piece here, we have digital first going into then information into with the MSL, and then again teeing up some more digital content as well. So that's also a way when you do have this potential friction at first. Uh, Look, digital can actually help you. It's not here to hurt. It's not here to to uh, to
Like,
make your job harder, but actually to make it easier for you. And again, to identify people, to identify HCPs that potentially even have the potential to become a KOL for you at some point. Good thing, don't change the world, at least not all at once. And I think that's the other, this is a big piece as well. So one campaign, two channels, that starts orchestration. And again, this is again a piece of that alignment, that change management that we've also talked about today. But really, your medical affairs leadership really wants your revolutionize, sorry, um, medical affairs. And of course, we want that as well. And the energy is good and the momentum behind that. But again, make sure those expectations are there. One campaign, two channels. And again, see what actually that conversation with compliance, what will you actually approve? That's the big one too. Don't just gamble and throw the dice and say, "All right, I hope they're gonna say yes to it." Have that conversation first. Have them actually become a partner of yours instead of the anxiety of, "Hey, I just submitted something and I'm not sure how it's gonna go." So, and then of course, once you do have that one campaign and two channels, add a third channel. Then all of a sudden run two campaigns, add a fourth, and all of a sudden you truly are the maestro of full orchestration happening. And this is really the way that every omni-channel program has been built. It's not a revolution, it's a pilot. So keep that in mind.
absolutely. It was funny. We were working with the group, and about 8 months in, they said, I think we're omnichannel now. Like, like it was one of those they didn't like realize that they had done it, but they had 9 campaigns running at the same time with overlapping audiences. And it was around that point they're like, oh, we really ought to now invest in something that helps us manage the orchestration. Because up to that point, you can do it in Excel, you could do it, using basic tools. But it was that moment, and that's when it really hit for me when I was like, yeah, if we as the change leaders, you as the change leaders need to have this vision towards where we're heading, but that doesn't mean you have to have everybody there on the first day. They could all of a sudden just realize that they were there and they'll just think that they were always operating that way. Um, Speaking of the change management and speaking of kind of where we are and where we want to go to, one of the things that Justin and I have been working on is a omni-channel readiness benchmark study. We've already got 12 different organizations that have shared through a survey. Here's where we are today on this digital and omni-channel transition. And here's our aspiration. And the biggest surprise to me so far is not everybody had the same aspirations. I kind of assumed we were all headed this way. If anybody would like to participate in it, we've got about 2 weeks left of an open window. There's no cost to participate. And basically, it takes 20, 30 minutes to complete. You can either do it by yourself, multiple people from the same organization are welcome to do it, or you could bring everybody into a conference room and have a conversation. But if you participate, you will get a debrief with Justin and get a copy of the report. You can either scan the barcode if you'd like, or just put me in the chat, and we'll send you a personalized link to participate in that benchmark study. Okay. So happy to. I'll just leave up that QR code one more moment, and then if anybody would like to participate, we will get it over to you.
One of the other things here that we've talked about and what you've heard today really comes around how do we get started here? And so one thing that I designed actually when I was starting this journey is kind of this 4-question intake tool. Um, we I try to tell everyone, please run every request through these 4 questions before you build anything, before you get started. They're going to create the clarity. They're going to actually make sure that before you do get hung up in compliance, before things get stalled, you can actually utilize this tool. And we're going to walk through it really quick right now. The first question, it's very basic, and so a lot of people, especially coming from the commercial side, or if you're a digital marketer, this might be a little bit of review. But who is the audience, and what is the unmet need? So we have to define the specific HCP subset with context. This is actually also one of the big things here. What specific subset are we targeting is the other piece of this. And the output is this audience statement. And the trap here, I will say, is it can't be just all HCPs. You need this to be a paragraph that everyone can align on in this case. So again, who is the audience? What is the unmet need? That's the first step in our intake.
Yeah, and for those of you who are asking medical these questions when they come and say, what, like an example that we heard recently is, hey, we have there's a guideline change. I want to send out a medical affairs email to 20,000 HCPs. Okay, great. That might be a starting point, but just asking 1 or 2 questions like, hey, would you want to share something different to those that are on your KOL list versus those that aren't? Right? Is there a different thing that you would like to have them do if they are, HCP with a whole lot of patients and are involved in scientific creation, right? They publish and they speak versus somebody who's a community provider. If you would like them to do 2 different things, that is a great way to start this conversation. And it's okay if we have 2 versions of that email in that example.
The second piece is what is the outcome and how will we know? And really, this is the single primary outcome tied to one of the following: awareness, understanding, belief, or action. And this is also, are we trying to drive awareness of new data? Are we deepening the understanding of an MOA? Is there a challenge of an existing belief? Support an HCP and putting it into action. And so really, these are the KPIs and measurement constraints that you're really, again, getting buy-in from the entire organization for this, or who you're working with within the organization. One thing that I will say, a trap here, is the fact that commercial style metrics can sometimes put teams on the defense because some teams have not had these same type of metrics before, that they might be a little wary of using. They might sound a little too commercial. So again, have these conversations and make sure that the medical teams that you're working with are aligned really to these, and that you do have buy-in, and also that leadership understands the metrics that you're going to be also then supplying them in the end. Third is, what content can we use? And again, we talked about this earlier: proactive and reactive. You want to inventory the content, audit it, and identify if there are gaps. This really is operational. It's an inventory truly. And this is really, you're designing a journey requiring content that might not exist. And that can be a trap where, hey, this is who we're going to target. This is what we want them to do. And oh no, we actually don't have content. So again, what happens? You have 2, 3, 4 week delays potentially in a campaign, or more. It might be 1, 2, 3, 4 months even at times. But again, the output really is a proactive, safe content and also a reactive library that of content that can be shared. So again, really important to do this kind of content audit. We can call it that as well.
Yeah, and this is that opportunity for you to take the answers from the previous step of, oh, wait, this is a audience that we're not engaging with, and we want to increase awareness. Okay, if we're not engaging with somebody and we want to increase awareness with those people, we need to have proactive content to do that, right? If it's, I want to deepen understanding with an audience that we have lots of engagement with, then through that engagement, we can create the opportunity to present them that information. But you have to compare this answer to the previous one and drive down to that level of specificity.
Yeah, absolutely, Scott. And our last one here, which channels are allowed and who owns what? And this again is a big question because again, on the commercial side, you might already have some of these channels in place. What can medical affairs use? But really, this is the goal where we map the channels to purpose, to the content, and to the ownership. Digital might build the system, but medical owns the integrity and field owns that human follow-up really. And so again, the output here of this step is channel map and governance. What can we do? Again, this is another one of those pieces. Make sure you have buy-in from compliance. Make sure you know what channels are allowed. And again, also, do we actually have this ready to go? Is this a channel we can prove today that we could deploy something in today, tomorrow? Again, if you already had the content approved. So those are the 4 steps here. And I've got a little surprise for everyone as well. And that surprise is actually, if anyone wants to right now, go ahead in the chat, just type PDF, and I will email you a copy of intake, actually as a worksheet that you can actually go ahead and you can utilize this. And you can also have a conversation if for some reason, you get stuck somewhere as well. And so again, today we've gone through kind of the omni-channel wall and how you get through it. Again, remember, people are going to say, we want omni-channel, but we don't know how to define it. Get that buy-in from day one. Everything becomes compliance as no. Again, people on the phone that are from the medical side, I know you deal with this as well. Commercial and digital teams, if you're jumping over the fence and working with medical on things, again, compliance always says no. Again, get in there, have that conversation right away with the compliance team, understand what the policy is, and also maybe even question if the policy needs to be updated to a more digital friendly universe. Because as we all know, we are living in a digital age here. Again, the field team feels threatened or bypassed. Design it with them. They are partners of yours. Also, when you're able to show that, hey, we can start a digital first only, a digital only campaign for you. We're not even going to worry about you. We're not even going to go after your KOLs at this point. But like Scott also showed earlier, we could also start that digital first to actually help tee up that information for the MSL. Targeting can feel impossible. Start with that one specific subset and part of the worksheet that I'll share with people. And again, no intake, no governance, no shared posture. Guess what? You now will have a 4-question intake tool, and it really is that easy. That's a great way to start. So again, we've got a few people that definitely want the PDF. Again, if you'd like it, I'm happy to share it. Just again, put in the chat, just PDF. We've got a number of people though that definitely want to get their hands on this. So that'll be exciting to walk people through as well.
So for those of you that are in the digital marketing space, I hope that you were able to walk away with some really specific things that you can do to better understand and work with medical affairs. And if you're in the medical affairs organization, some things that you can do to pull in your marketing partners and help them be successful as your partner. We have about 10 minutes. So if everybody could open up that chat and put either put a question that you have that you'd like us to answer, or if you don't have a question, what was your biggest takeaway out of today's session? What's the one thing that you could go back today or tomorrow and do to help move your digital and audience channel campaign forward?
So one of the biggest takeaways: start small. Rome was not built overnight, and so in that same fashion, again, you're not going to go from 1 to 15, but you can go from 1 to 2 channels. And again, that will also be able to truly show the medical affairs leadership that that this can work.
Liz, thanks for sharing your question. Yes, we can definitely do some more benchmarking case studies. In fact, we have a couple of case studies that are written up that Liz will send to you afterwards also. But one of the things about tracking and metrics, so last week, or what was it, the week before, at MAPS, I was one of the speakers at the Insights Masterclass, and my section was on metrics and tracking. And one of the things to know about metrics and tracking with medical affairs is that if the goal isn't an impact goal, then the measurement won't measure impact. If the goal is activity, then the metric is activity. So if your goal is, I want to send out 20,000 emails, guess what? We can track that you've sent out 20,000 emails. If the goal is, I want to know if people care about the email, we could track opens and clicks, things like that. Again, regardless of the channel, whether it's email or social or whatever it is. As you move down that chain and you want to start measuring a change in understanding, a change in belief, and a change in action, it goes above and beyond the omni-channel conversation, right? It starts with defining what those are. And it might be a little early, but one of the webinars we're doing in May is by far the most comprehensive and best implementation of a care gaps program I've ever seen. We had the head of medical excellence from that organization presenting with us in May. So we're going to be putting that out next month, but that would be like the best. If I want to see a change in clinical behavior tied to a change in belief, tied to did people engage with our content? So that's a place to start. But you need to find out from the medical team what it is they're trying to accomplish. If you want a change in belief, then we have to measure belief. And people on this call, actually, I know many of you are doing things tied to belief measurement, whether it's your MSLs tracking it as part of your insights program, using Sermo or other partners to do surveys out to people so you can track that way. So that would be belief. Understanding is basically any type of knowledge assessment that is tied to your piece. Okay. If you have further, if I didn't quite catch it right, please let me know. Is it important to understand which channels map into the scientific journey? I love scientific journey. So, Justin, do you want to maybe tackle what are some of those channels that are best for awareness versus understanding versus belief?
Sure. So when we start to look at things like awareness, we would look at things like potentially social channels, places like that that you can compliantly put that information and tee that information out to a larger audience. So that could be done again on a public social channel like LinkedIn, let's say, or Twitter or X. But it could also be done on a closed social network as well, something more like a Sermo or a Doximity as well. So those are potentials there. When we do start to, there are other channels or other other places within the scientific journey that we could go ahead and say, all right, uh, once we do, maybe we're also presenting data and we're putting this data out on Sermo again, or some of these places. We could also put these out onto into our own portal. I think I think there's the portals actually are one of the most underutilized space things within medical affairs that I continue to see, especially portals that are being done right. I talk to a lot of different organizations that actually are like, we have a place that an HCP can download scientific and have scientific exchange and maybe a poster or something like that. And I go, but are you tracking? Like, can you actually, is there a login? Do you have an NPI number that you could then say, this specific HCP has actually engaged with us here by downloading this, and now we can continue that journey on. So I think those are, Scott, maybe 2 or 3 ways or areas. That's definitely definitely a few of those channels.
Yeah, absolutely. Richard, about AI transforming omnichannel. So, what I'm seeing is that there's three places that AI is really impacting omnichannel and medical. The first is content creation. It's amazing today, right? So there are some really good platforms out there that can take a scientific paper and you can say, a, I want to increase awareness of this scientific paper. This is where it's going to be housed. And can you please create me compliant materials that fit these 12 channels or 2 channels or 1 channel, right? And so being able to take one piece of content and make it channel specific is a very good first place for AI utilization within Omnichannel. The second is around the orchestration. So, what used to be very much a rules based system of if somebody does this, then do that, and having to think of every permutation, you can now have more nuanced and sophisticated orchestration. So, we're working with a team right now that is using a platform, and we're able to put in intent rules, not just action rules. And so, you can start looking at. And by the way, whatever AI platform you are using today, whether it's Copilot, Claude, Gemini, whatever, you can actually kind of test some of these concepts before you do any major investment. So, one of the things that we did with that group that was going to program the enterprise version of it is we said, great, let me pull in data about HCPs, pull in strategy, pull in content, pull in history, and let's just ask it, right? For this HCP, based on the data that I have, what should the next best action, the next step be? And should it be digital or a person? And here's the thing is that AI is only as good as the data that you have. And so going back to some of the things that we've talked about already is that if you don't have something for it to optimize around, we are trying to close this care gap. We're trying to change this belief. We're trying to increase people's understanding of this. You need to give it something to optimize around, or else it doesn't know what thing it should be trying to do. And so that's the most important part I'm finding for AI. And then the last part, which I'm going to tell you right now is not my expertise at all. Can't tell you how to do it. I just know it's important, is to get into GEO. So many of you might be familiar with search engine optimization, SEO. GEO is generative engine optimization. And it's making sure that all of your content that is available to the public in the public domain is in the right format and in the right places so that it can be found by agents when it's bringing answers and it's credible. So that would be the last piece I would do. So Richard, I hope that answers your question. Yep. Wonderful. A real world tangible example of a team that wants to start an omni-channel approach. For example, to do some awareness on a new treatment in some heme or kidney disease space. Go ahead, Justin.
Yeah, so I think in this case, the first thing to do is really to make sure you have one clear goal. I think it would be, if it's helping doctors better understand which patients may be right for a treatment, for example, and don't do this as one-off tactics. Actually sit there and connect a few channels around a goal. If you're going to send an educational email, maybe that links doctors to medical content with approved data, and then use that as an engagement signal. Like email clicks or page visits, like Scott was mentioning, to decide who might benefit from that MSL follow-up. So again, that digital only, digital first, and then kind of going into the MSL piece. I think that would be a good way. And then of course that follow-up could also be an invitation to a peer webinar. So again, it's, rather than just thinking of tactics of email, website, and MSLs, actually Omnichannel connects them all into a coordinated experience. So can definitely reach out to you and have this conversation a little more as well.
Good. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. I know we're at the top of the hour. Know so many of you, you know us. Please feel free to reach out with any other questions that you have. And we've got some follow-ups to send you. I hope you have a wonderful week and a great summer. Take care.